Hello, welcome to another Totalist Landscape oil painting demonstration. This is your painter in residence, M. Francis McCarthy. And the painting I'm bringing you today has got the temporary title of Zorn Landscape. And the reason for that title is this whole painting is based on the Zorn Palette. If you haven't heard of Anders Zorn, go look him up right now. Just pause the video. He was brilliant and very famous in painting circles for his limited palette. And the limited palette consists of yellow ochre. In his case, it would have been vermilion or carmine red. My case, it was cadmium red, black, and white. That is it. And it is actually a really good palette. I'd say most of what he did was figurative or figures in the landscape. I'm looking at some now on his Wikipedia page, and they're brilliant. And I can see that the palette that I just outlined was probably sufficient to paint these paintings. They're pretty incredible, and now some of them I think are not with that limited palette. They definitely, it's not the world's greatest landscape palette, I have to say. The greens are so limited. You'd go a lot further with a palette that say had cadmium yellow and cadmium red and black. I could go really far with that. In fact, I may try a palette like that. You can definitely use the black in place of a blue for quite a lot of paintings because it really is a blue. Yeah. And so you're seeing me do my drawing stage right now. I'm doing my drawing with some nice lamp black, and it's a scene that I've painted in the past, but not this size. This is maybe the largest. This is a 9 by 12. And I found I was just doing quite a lot of simplifying, and now what I didn't share with you in this quicker video is the pardon me, sorry about that. The extensive color mixing session was almost 20 minutes, and I did record that for the members area. But what I might do is I might do a little demo of just the Zorn palette. What I do think, if you're a painter starting out, I recommend you give it a crack, because you're going to find that having these extensive limitations forces you to do all sorts of things that are actually pretty healthy. Now, this painting, I would be honest, I mean, I didn't struggle with the drawing or the rendering of the, I've done a bazillion trees and streams and skies, but I did struggle to get colors that worked for me, and in the end I just started slapping quite red reds into the grassy areas, and it ended up looking just fine. It looks real nice. So it was a good result, even though it was a real struggle, I have to say. And I think it's good to set up these sorts of struggles sometimes. I don't know if I'll be using the Zorn palette a lot. I have a student here in Fongaray, and she does a lot more figurative things than I do. And I was telling her about the Zorn palette, and I think it could be very helpful to have your options limited like that. And to be honest, you can do a heck of a lot with a deep bright red, a fairly earthy greenish yellow, and white. As far as getting the figure. Also, I have to say the cad red and the black produced a perfectly workable brown. It really did. Yeah, it was fine. That brown was just fine. One of the things I think that was a bit of a challenge was the only transparent color in the palette was the black. So the white, the ochre, and the cad red are all very, very opaque colors. And I think I lean on transparency more than I realize when I start looking at things like this, because but I was at the point we're in the painting right now. I was pretty comfortable. I used gray instead of blue all the time. And I use yellow ochre in my skies all the time. It's probably one of the main reasons I have it on my palette on a regular basis. It's a great color for skies because it's not a screamy color. And it really works well with blue or gray when you want to start, working in with the white towards the horizon. There's hardly a painting I do where I've brought in some yellow ochre into that white gray mix going into the horizon. It's just perfect for that. It is really that color. Yeah. Challenges, I mean, getting a real orange was difficult with just, yellow ochre and cadmium red. Sorry, apologize for that. Got a Denny. There's the kids outside playing. Yeah, sorry for the interruptions. Yeah, so far you can see, yeah, I've done skies like that. That's not a big deal. The sky wasn't that big a deal, but what was really, I use a very earthy green in my daily painting regimen, which is made from Hansa yellow and black. And so that's an earthy green, but it's a real green. This green you get from the yellow ochre and black is muted, to say the least, but it's actually quite beautiful. And I think one of the things you realize is that you can definitely make a painting from a limited palette like this that's going to be a good painting. And one of the reasons it's going to be good is you've got built-in harmony. When you only have 4 colors, every color has a relationship to every other color. There's no color in the painting that's pure. I didn't go anywhere near the pure Cad Red, for example. In some cases we're quite close into, straight up yellow ochre, but even there it's always been modified in some way, shape, or form. And one of the things that I did was, and I highly recommend you do this if you're working with an intermediate a palette that has no intermediate colors, is go ahead and mix your intermediates. So what I did was I mixed up a nice pile of brown with the black and the Cad Red and just a little bit of the yellow ochre, and I had that there right alongside the Cad Red and the black, right in between them, just like it had come out of a tube. And I did the same thing with, the closest orange I could get, which was very corally, to say the least. I mixed a pile of that as well, and was throwing that into my greens and things, and it all worked quite well. Anyway, yes, let's read a little bit about Anders Zorn, and he is named Anders Leonard Zorn. This is from Wikipedia. What is it? An Aquarius. All right. 18th, born February 18th, 1860, and he died in 1920. So nice long life. Was one of Sweden's foremost artists. He obtained international success as a painter, sculptor, and etcher. His etchings are beautiful. Who cares about his portrait subjects? Don't care. Biography, born and raised in his grandparents' farm. Yeah, I tend not to care about any of this. Studied at the Royal Swedish Academy of Arts, where he amazed his teachers with his talent. I am not surprised by that. Members of the Stockholm Society approached him with commissions. This is how Zorn met his wife, who was very beautiful. I believe she was a painter as well. I could be wrong. And he was an international success. So if you haven't heard of this guy, go look him up. He's amazing. And what he didn't do was pure landscape like I'm doing here. He always had figures in there. And yeah, that's not my thing. But figures in the landscape, that's one of the reasons Zorn came up. I was telling my student that the greatest challenge in painting is to do the human figure in the landscape. Because you've got so many problems there, so many potential ways to fail, and Zorn was the master of it, and he's very famous for this palette. And a lot of people say, "Oh, he didn't just use this palette," blah, 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 which is obvious when you look at Some of the paintings on the Wikipedia here, clearly he's using some, viridian greens in some of them and other tones, but it's obvious when he does lean very heavily on this limited palette. And the point that people, I think, miss is that you don't need a lot of colors to make an amazing painting. Even this painting, I'm planning on coming back to this one. It was, especially when I was getting into these areas where we are now. You can see I'm just throwing down this red, and because I only have 2 greens, I couldn't even get a real spread. And but so what was my solution? Well, to throw in a bunch of red underneath, and then when I'm going over it with the green, I'll have some difference there, and that ended up being a really good workaround. But I can tell you, when I was doing the painting, I was like, oh, what do I do? And I have enough experience to know not to just try and do the whole thing with 2 greens. That's not going to look good. And I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do something that's honestly not going to look good. And I have to say, at the end of the day, I'm pretty happy with the way this painting turned out. I do think I'm going to be putting it up on the easel again, whether I continue with the limited palette at that time. And why? Well, there's a few, like, I would like to do some little smaller black branches in that area where the trees are, although I have to admit I really like the way the design of that came out. There's a nice flow to it, and that was quite a chaotic part of the reference. It was very dark, just a bunch of trees with rocks, and a bit hard to see what was up. In previous occasions where I painted this scene, I usually just kept it quite dark with just a few trees, but here I decided to open it up, have some sky coming through. Pardon me. And I want you to note that the color that's coming behind the trees looks like it's the same color as the sky on the other side, but it's actually darker. So that's a tip for today, if you made it this far. You want to make sure, I'm treating those as sky holes, so the color in your sky holes, the holes in your trees where the sky comes through, is always a bit darker than the sky around it. Okay, so and most teachers will teach you that fairly early on, but I don't know, you may not have had any other teacher but me, so thank you for that. And hopefully you're painting away. And the truth of the matter is when it comes to teachers and painting and all that, the best teacher of painting is to go out and paint a lot. And this is a way to come up with something that's going to be good. And really, it's what I did. I had some books. I had some really good books actually. I'm always recommending The Painterly Approach by Bob Rome. It's an amazing book. Go buy it. You won't regret it. He's an impressionist, but getting paint on a board is getting paint on a board, is getting paint on the canvas. It's all getting the paint down. If you want to take a toneless approach that's different from an impressionist approach, you're still putting paint down. So he can really help you, I think. Also, I enjoyed Kevin McPherson's books. The one that pops into mind is Fill Your Paintings with Light and Color. That was his second book. I forget the name of his first book, but just get them both if you're starting out. You won't regret that either. And he really helped me because he was the one that put me on to doing lots of little paintings with a limited palette. And which brings us around. We tied the whole video into a nice little bow. Limited palettes are valuable. They're good. They're great for as a learning tool. They're great to stretch you out, and you can produce paintings that have instant harmony. And so if I was going to do a palette that was similar for just landscape purposes, like I said, I probably would do something like I did in one of my previous limited palette demonstrations, which was a blue, like a phthalo blue, cad yellow. I could get away with cad red, but I'd probably use burnt sienna or alizarin crimson, black and white. I could do almost anything with that. Anyway, I can see we're running out of time, so thank you for joining me today. Please go to my website and send me a donation or buy a painting. Click like, subscribe, join the members area, and see the live version of this. And until I come back with another video, take good care and stay out of trouble.